We're just going to give it another minute or two to let folks join. All right, I think we can go ahead and start with introductions and the agenda and get rolling. So thank you to everyone who is joining today for our second webinar in this series of 4 webinars. This one will address affordable gas service in Philadelphia, keeping your gas on. We've got joining us today Jolene Price, who is an attorney in the energy unit, and Desil Kyo, who is a paralegal in the energy unit. I'm just going to go ahead and flip to the next slide. So the energy unit at CLS fulfills 3 major roles. So we are advocates for access to safe, affordable water, electric, and home heating services for low-income Philadelphians. And we do direct representation of individuals. We also work as advocates doing systemic advocacy and policy work related to these issues. And then we also host events like these and others, community education and empowerment events. So just to briefly go through our agenda for this webinar, we're going to be talking about shutoffs in Philadelphia. Bill assistance programs, how to lower your monthly bill, gas shopping, what it is, and weatherization, and if we have time, then we'll go through dispute processes as well. And I just want to note that we will be sending out this PowerPoint after the webinar is over, and I'll send out a recording as well. All right. So just as a brief update, the ban on Pico and Pgw, so gas and electric shutoffs, did end on March 31st, which means that Pico and Pgw are allowed to start shutting off customers, or were allowed to start shutting off customers on April 1st, 2021. And for CAP customers, customers who are on Pico's customer assistance program, those shutoffs are allowed to begin on May 1st, 2021. So we may start seeing more shutoff notices for electric and gas. Meanwhile, the water department still has a ban on shutoffs, and that's going to remain in place for all residential customers through April of 2022, so April of next year. And there will be no late payment penalties or other enforcement measures for customers who are on the tiered assistance program or the senior citizen discount until April of 2022. However, customers who aren't on TAP or the senior citizen discount may start to see late payment penalties and referrals to collection agencies beginning on May 1st, 2021. Those are allowed starting May 1st, 2021. So we'll go into a little bit more in the next slides about what to do if you get a shutoff notice and general ways to reduce your monthly bill. So I'm going to pass it over to Desil to get
Thanks,
started.
Cassidy. So I'm going to be talking about PGW's Customer Responsibility Program, what it is, how to apply, some tips on applying, and I'll also talk about some grant assistant programs. And then we'll have a short Q&A, and then my colleague Jolene will talk about shopping and weatherization and dispute if we have time. So PGW has a program for low-income customers called Customer Responsibility Program, abbreviated CRP. CRP is a great program that helps lowers your bills every month based on usage and your income. So based on how low your income is, you're either going to pay 4 through 6% of your income. And you have to be below 150% of the federal poverty level to be eligible for CRP. You would also pay an average bill if your average bill is actually less than what your bill would be based on income. When you apply for CRP, PGW is going to be using the average of your bill at the time of the application. This would soon be adjusted to a budget bill, and I'll talk more about what a budget bill is in future slides. Another great thing about the CRP program is that you can get debt forgiveness for over 36 months, over a period of 36 months if you pay your current bills on time. So what does this mean? So let's say you have a current balance of $1,000 and you are applying for CRP for the first time. If you are approved for CRP, that $1,000 balance will be set aside in what's called arrearage forgiveness and not enforced. So all you have to do is pay your current charges in the future, which doesn't include the old balance of $1,000. And if you pay your current charges for a period of 36 months, that old $1,000 balance that's in a arrearage forgiveness will actually be eliminated, will be forgiven. And so you don't have to pay that at all after a period of 36 months of paying your CRP bills on time. So that's a great thing about CRP. Another great thing about CRP is that if you are facing a shutoff, if you get a shutoff notice and you enroll in CRP, you will no longer you will no longer be in danger of a shutoff. Now, for customers who were on CRP and got off somehow, you will need to pay what's called a cure amount to get back on CRP, and I'll explain what that is down the road. And you might have your arrears, that is your old balance, be reinforced if you were taken off CRP, but you can ask PGW to have your arrears re-deferred back into that arrearage forgiveness program. Next slide, please. Okay. So this slide talks about the income limit to qualify for the CRP program. This is the same income limit that it also applies to Pico's CAP program and also for the water department's TAP program. So they're all using the same income level of 150% of the federal poverty level. And as you can see here, we have a list of the maximum income based on household size. Keep in mind that these income levels are for gross income, which is the income before taxes is taken out. And and you have to consider the income of every single person living in the household or living in the house actually. So if you are living together with a roommate and your roommate is not related to you, but you guys are living together, that would be a household size of 2, right? Not 1, but it would be a household size of 2, and you would need the information of the roommate, name, date of birth, and income to apply for the CRP program. Okay, so what are some common issues that customers face when they apply for CRP? So first of all, how do you know if you're actually enrolled in CRP? It's actually quite easy. If you just look on your PGW bill, there's a few places on the bill where you can see if you're on CRP. The very first page will usually say, past due CRP, current due CRP charges. On the second or third page, you might see a section that says CRP discount. And then a third and fourth page, you might see a box that says you are currently enrolled in CRP. So there's multiple places on the bill to find out if you're actually enrolled in CRP. Now, you might have been enrolled in the past in CRP and you might have gotten off. So if you think that you were on CRP in the past but no longer on CRP, check your bill to see if that is still the case. You can also just call the PGW Customer Service Center and ask them, am I on CRP? They should be able to tell you pretty easily. Now, for people who so for the cure amount, so another common issue with the cure with CRP is that you have to pay the cure amount, and I'll go into detail a little bit later. But what the cure amount is, if you were on CRP in the past, but somehow you got off either because you defaulted, you didn't pay your current charges, or you forgot to recertify and you were removed from CRP, you now have to pay a certain amount to get back on the CRP program. Another issue that customers have is providing verification of income. And I'll talk about that more in future slides, how that could be actually a difficult thing for some people to do. Okay, next slide. So this is an example of a PGW bill where you can see on the front page, it says that someone is enrolled in CRP. If you just look at the left side, it says past due CRP charges, current CRP charges. That's a really easy way to know if you are on CRP or not. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk some more about the cure amount. As I mentioned before, it's the amount you have to pay to get back on the CRP program if you were previously enrolled. It's calculated based on what your CRP payments would have been had you stayed on the program. So let's say you were on CRP, but you were removed 5 months ago for whatever reason. So to get back on CRP, you now have to pay those 5 months of payments that you missed in order to get back on the CRP program. So you don't have to pay the entire balance to get back on CRP. You just have to pay the months of CRP payments that you missed to get back on. Now, because it's based on how long you've been off of CRP, your CRP cure amount will increase with each new billing cycle because that adds another month of CRP payments that you have missed. The great thing about paying the CRP cure amount is that you can use LIHEAP or other grants to apply to the cure amount. It's hard to actually know what the cure amount is sometimes. So if you don't know, just call PGW and ask them, first of all, is there a cure amount? And second, how much the cure amount is. So you know how much you have to pay back to get back on CRP. One good thing about the CRP cure amount is that if your income has changed, so let's say 5 months ago when you were on CRP, you had a higher income, now your income is lower for whatever reason, you should be able to recalculate a lower CRP payment based on your current income, and your cure amount would be a lower cure amount based on the income as well. Next slide, please. Okay. Another issue with applying for CRP that I mentioned is income verification. So a lot of people don't get regular pay stubs or they don't keep track of the regular pay stubs. So it can be hard to show income verification. PGW requires verification of the past 30-day household income. Again, household is everybody living in the house. So what does that mean? They will accept certain forms of income and not accept certain forms of income verification. So pay stubs, they will accept pay stubs that are current, meaning within 30 days. The income on the pay stub has to show the current amount that you're getting, your current income for that pay period, and also the year-to-date amount since you've been working that year as well. It also has to show the gross income. So again, PGW relies on gross income, pre-tax income. So your pay stub has to show the gross and not just the net income. You can also submit Social Security award letters. So if you're getting SSI, SSD, or Social Security retirement, or any other benefits from SSA, you can submit an award letter and that will be considered acceptable income. You can also submit bank statements. If you're getting any cash assistance from Department of Human Services, the Welfare Office, you can submit a Compass printout or a document from DHS. If you're getting unemployment compensation, you can submit a letter from Department of Labor and Industry. If you are self-employed, you can submit federal tax return. If you're getting child support or alimony or foster care payments, you can submit documentation of those payments. And if somebody else is providing assistance to you, if somebody is giving you financial assistance in the form of money or other forms, you can fill out a section of the CRP application and have that person sign that section to show that you're getting assistance from somebody else. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, PGW does not accept other forms of verification. So if you're thinking about submitting these other forms, don't, because it will not be accepted. If you have a pay stub that doesn't show the net or gross year-to-date income, or is outdated, right? It's beyond 30 days. They will not accept that. A letter from an employer saying, you know, my employee Bob makes this much a month. That's not acceptable. A profit loss statement, if you or someone else is self-employed, that's not acceptable. If somebody gives you money or provides you support, a letter from that person saying that they provide you support, that's not acceptable, right? So that person who provides you support has to fill out that section in the application. They can't write you a separate letter saying that they give you support. They also will not accept a PHA utility check. It's not considered income. They also will not accept W-2 forms. Now, if you're having trouble providing income verification, or you think you've provided sufficient income verification, but PGW does not, has not accepted it for some reason, please contact us, CLS, for possible assistance. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to talk about some tips now for applying for CRP. So the first thing you should know is that your gas supplier must be PGW. A lot of people actually don't know, but if you go on page 2 or 3 of your bill, it'll say who your gas supplier is. It might not be PGW. You might have switched to a different company without even realizing it. It might be Energy or SNF or another company. So if your gas supplier is a different company besides PGW, you will not be eligible for CRP unless you cancel your account with the other company first. The other thing you should have prepared in advance before applying for CRP is information about every person living in the home. So you're going to need name, first and last name, birth date, Social Security number or ITINs, which are not required for the paper application, but might be required for the online application, which I'll talk more about. And you'll need income documentation for everybody living in the household. If you need more room, so the application itself, I think, allows for only 5 members in the household to put information. If you have 6 members or 7 members, you can attach additional sheet to add the information of the other members in the household. Now, in the past, it was somewhat convenient to apply for CRP because all you had to do was go to a PGW customer service center or a neighborhood energy center at NEC, and you can apply in person. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, PGW offices are still closed and many NECs are also closed. Some NECs are still open, but you have to call to see what their hours are, and you have to make an appointment to come in person if you need help with applying for CRP. You can also mail your application with the supporting documents to PGW, but as you all know, there's been some delays with the Postal Service, so mailing might take a long time. Next slide, please. Okay. So if you don't want to mail your application, if you're not able to go to an NEC to apply, you should consider applying online on PGW's website. I have a link here to the CAP or the CRP program where you can apply. Now, one thing to note is that you need to have a PGW online account before you apply. So you have to create an account with a username, a password, security questions, an email address. All of that needs to be done before you apply for CRP. You also should have prepared in advance electronic copies of your documents. So take a picture of your pay stubs, of your ID, and have it be ready to load or to attach when you apply for CRP. One misconception about creating an online account is that if you have an online account, you no longer can get paper bills or mailed bills, and that is not the case. If you still prefer to get your bills mailed to you, you can still get that bill mailed to you or have it be in paper form, even if you have an online account. So you don't have to worry about your bills becoming online just because you have an online account. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to talk now about budget billing. So budget billing is an interesting, interesting, I guess, program that PGW has that allows customers to pay the same amount, a fixed amount every month based on the average bill. So what PGW does is that it takes your past 12 months of usage, it averages that out, and that is going to be the amount that you pay every single month. Now, every single month can be, it's going to change every few months. So you might pay that same amount. Let's say you're paying $50 a month for the past 3 months or 4 months. That $50 a month can change to a higher amount or a lower amount depending on how much you have used during those past 3 or 4 months. So let me give you an example. Let's say during the winter time, you've been paying $50 a month, but in actuality, you have been using a lot more gas because your heat, you've been using a lot of heat because it's cold outside, and you're paying $50 a month in November, December, January, and February, and then in March, your bill might go up to maybe $100 a month, and that's because it's taking into account how much you've actually used during the winter months, um, and it'll increase based on that. But likewise, in the summertime, it might go down again because you've actually been using less in gas. So the fixed amount doesn't mean the same amount every single month, but it means more or less every few months you'll have the same amount, and it might go up depending on how much you use. Next slide, please. So, I don't like budget billing, but a lot of people love budget billing, and it depends on your situation. So again, if you are someone who has a fixed income, so let's say you get SSI or SSD or a pension every month, and it's a limited amount, and you prefer to have the same amount in PGW bills, this would be a good option for you, right? You want to know every month more or less how much you're paying, then consider being on budget billing. Again, because PGW uses an average of the past 12 months to calculate your budget billing, you want to make sure that you've been living in your house for at least a year. So so the amount isn't too high, for example. So let's say you just moved in during the winter time, then your average bill might be really high because all you've had are really high bills based on the winter bills. So if you're someone, again, you tend to have really high bills, in the winter, they spike to like 300 or more, and you would prefer to have a more uniform, lower amount in the winter, consider budget billing as an option for you. But again, not everybody likes budget billing, but if these situations apply to you, then it might be a good option for you. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to go over really quickly some information about grant assistance programs. The first one is LIHEAP, and that stands for Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. It's administered through the Welfare Office, Department of Human Services. There's 2 types of LIHEAP you can apply for. There's LIHEAP Cash, which is $200 or more based on income. And then there's LIHEAP Crisis, which currently is a maximum of $800. Now, to apply for LIHEAP Crisis, you have to have a past due bill, or a shutoff notice in this case, because shutoff notices are now being issued. LIHEAP cash and crisis grants are based at 150% of the federal poverty level, which is the same as the CRP program. So if you make more than 150, then you will not be eligible for LIHEAP, but you can apply for USEF, which is the next grant on the slide. And the USEF grant, UESF, stands for Utility Emergency Services Fund. That one is a much higher amount. It's $1,500 for Pico or Pgw and $3,000 max for a water bill. But if you're currently on a TAP program, you will not be eligible for USEF, unfortunately. One thing to note about the USEF grant is that it has a weird condition, or a weird requirement. So in order to get either $1,500 or $3,000, you have to be able to bring your balance down to 0. in order to be eligible for those amounts. So let's say your balance is $6,000, right? And the amount you need to get back on CRP, your CRP cure amount is $2,000. In order to get the $1,500 for your PGW cure amount, you would have to bring the balance to zero, meaning you'd have to provide the difference between 2,000 and 1,500, which is $500. You'd have to pay that amount yourself in order to get the $1,500 in USEF grant. So that's a little bit of a unique requirement for USEF, but there are other grants you can apply for. So you can maybe get LIHEAP crisis and a USEF combined, and that will cover the entire cure amount to get back on CRP. As I mentioned, USEF has a higher income limit. It's 175 of the federal poverty level. So if you're not eligible for LIHEAP, consider applying for the USEF grant. A third grant program that's available right now, and this became available during the pandemic, is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And this covers a lot more in utility bills than the other two, or potentially can cover a lot more. It can cover your current utility bills or up to 12 to 15 months of past due utility bills. And the income level is much, much higher than the other two grants. So the income limit is 80% of the area median income. So for Philadelphia, that's roughly about $54,000 a year for one person, which is much higher income limit than the other two programs. Next slide, please. Okay. So how do you apply for these different programs? So for LIHEAP, you can call the LIHEAP number that's listed on here. You can go to the LIHEAP office. Well, actually you can't go because they're currently closed, but you can drop off an application. They have drop boxes in front of the county assistance offices. You can drop off the application. You can also apply online on My Compass website or the My Compass app. For USEF, you have to call a neighborhood energy assistance number, or you can call the USEF hotline number, which we have listed here as well. And again, there are many NECs that are still open and helping with USEF applications. Just call in advance to see what their hours are and if they accept in-person appointments. And then for rent or utility assistance, there's a website you can visit, phlrentassistance.org, and they have a lot of information on current grant programs, including the emergency assistance program that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so I'm gonna open up now for questions. If anybody has any questions before we move on to the next part of the webinar. So it doesn't look like there are any questions in the chat. If you guys have questions, you can go ahead and write in the chat, or you can speak up, I think, as well.
Well, so if you think of any questions while I'm going through my piece of my presentation, feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll save some time at the end for questions as well.
So I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jolene now.
Thanks to Sil. Thanks for that overview. I am going to talk a little bit about gas shopping and the competitive market. And then if I have time, discuss some dispute processes and weatherization options. So what is shopping? What is gas shopping? Gas shopping is when you choose a supplier, a gas supplier that's not PGW. Probably more familiar with this in the electric context. That's been happening for longer. But the same companies are also, some of the same companies are also doing gas supply. But that's companies like NRG, SFE, Direct Energy. Those are some of the companies that will offer gas supply, not from PGW. Regardless of who you purchase your gas from, PGW is still responsible for the distribution of the gas, which is getting the gas to you and all of the infrastructure to get the gas to you. So regardless of who you're paying for gas supply, you're always going to be with PGW for distribution. Often, folks don't know if they're shopping or not, and I wanted to just go through a couple slides to sort of where to look on your bill to see, or someone you're working with bill, to see what whether someone is supplying, someone is shopping with a supplier. I don't have a BGW, just like in the last month or two, changed their bills. So I'm going to show you a shopping bill from the previous bill format, and then show you where you might look for it in the new bill format. But I haven't found a shopping bill from the new bill format, so apologies. But if you look on this bill, you'll see that right under the billing summary, it says your natural gas supplier is SFE Energy Pennsylvania. So this customer was shopping for gas with SFE Energy. You can also look on the this is the third page of the old bill, and you'll see under supply charges, it says supply charges, and then it says SFE Energy Pennsylvania. This is the screenshot of the new bill. You'll see here, there's still that breakdown of charges box. And again, there's a supply charges line. And if you're shopping, it should show up there. It should show up there what who you're shopping with and what the price is. So a couple questions to ask when you're considering whether or not you should shop for gas or use a different supplier for gas. The first, as Desil touched on, is to ask whether or not you're planning to enroll in CRP. PGW doesn't allow CRP customers to shop for gas. And if you have a supplier, you won't be allowed to enroll in CRP until you drop the supplier. What price is the supplier offering? And how does that price compare to the price you're getting with PGW? So PGW's price is called the price to compare. And if you ever want to know what PGW's current price to compare is, all you have to do is type into Google PGW price to compare, and you should get something. You can also go to PA-gas-switch. I think it's or might become. Go to the PA-gas-switch website. It'll have PGW's price to compare. So you want to compare that to the price the supplier is offering per CCF unit of gas. And you want to look at whether the supplier is offering a fixed price, which is like you would put for the time of the contract, you would pay the same amount per CCF, a variable amount, which means that it could vary depending on gas supply, or an unlimited rate, which would be a flat cost regardless of how much you use. You also want to look at how long the contract is and whether there are any other fees. If it's a 3-month contract, that's a short contract, and you'll have to remember at the end of the 3 months to check if they're going to move you onto a different rate after that first contract. You also want to see if there are any cancellation fees or enrollment fees. Those may be additional fees that are charged with a contract. And it's just a note that in our experience, most residential customers pay more when using an alternative supplier than they do when they're just with PGW. And that it's not to say that you can't save money, but it does take some effort to find those prices and continue to get those good prices on the suppliers. And I just wanted to, this is from that same shopping bill that I showed previously, and I just wanted to just show where you can see the price to compare and how much you're paying on your bill. If you look at the bottom where it says PGW messages, it says your estimated gas price to compare is, and it says approximately 47 cents per CCF, which is the unit of gas. And then if you look up at the supply charges line, it says SFE Energy CCF at approximately 72 cents per CCF. So in this case, this customer is paying a fair amount more per unit of gas than they otherwise would have been if they had stayed with PGW. Some considerations for gas shopping. Often there's an economic pressure. Many suppliers, when they come to your door or approach you in outside or call you, will promise savings on your gas. You may sign up for a rate that is cheaper than PGW, but if you do that, it may only last 3 months, 6 months, and you should make sure to keep track of when that rate will end so that you can switch to another contract that gives you also gives you a lower rate, or to go back to PGW. The suppliers can use high pressure sales tactics using door-to-door or telemarketing. And one thing I just always like to tell people is you can always sign up later when you have had time to do research. You can always go to the PA Gas Switch website and review all the offers and all the different offers that the suppliers have. You also, we've been seeing more and more that customers will think they're only signing up for electric supply, and they're actually signing up for electric and gas supply, so they don't even realize that they've been switched on the gas side. So just be clear with whoever you're talking to which utilities you're signing up for. If the language is unclear or unfamiliar, particularly if you speak limited English, or even if you're just confused, again, you can have time. You can go research things. You do not have to sign up on the spot. And I would always, for folks who speak limited English, would see the suppliers are supposed to provide you language interpretation. You shouldn't have to use family members to understand what's going on, and definitely seek out that language interpretation before agreeing to anything. So what do you do if you sign up and then decide you didn't want to do that, or if you're switched you switched and you didn't think you agreed to it at all? You have a 3-day right to cancel. So a customer has 3 days from the time they receive a disclosure statement from the supplier to cancel the contract. Regardless of where you are in your contract, you can always return to default service, which is gas supply with PGW. And you can do that by calling PGW and asking to be switched back to PGW or the supplier. That is always going to be subject to the cancellation fees in the contract with the supplier. But those cancellation fees are not going to be on your utility bill, and they're not going to be not going to lead to those fees themselves are not going to lead to utility disconnection. They may try to collect on them, but there's no threat of termination around those fees. If you ever learn that you're on a supplier and you don't remember being signed up for that supplier, file a complaint with the utility and call the Public Utility Commission and file a complaint. That is, it's a practice called slamming, and it is illegal to sign people up without authorization. And so I definitely recommend filing complaints if you can, if that happens. Regardless of when you sign up with a different supplier, that doesn't change anything about your previous bills. So if you have a back balance with PGW, switching to SFE for gas supply is not going to relieve you of your obligation to pay those back bills, and PGW can still use all of its methods to try and collect, including possible termination of service. So signing up with supplier does not get you out of your previous steps. So I wanted to talk a little bit about PGW's dispute process. We always like to, just make sure it's clear that there's a wide variety of things that you can actually dispute with the utility. Attempted shutoff of utility service, high bills, whether or not they're giving you a payment arrangement. You can also file a dispute if they deny your CRP application or refuse to either accept a medical certificate or send a medical certificate to your doctor. There's anything where you feel like, well, I feel like the utility should have done something different. You can say, like, I'd like to file a dispute about this. You're always welcome to call CLS and get some advice on whether it's a valid dispute, and we can talk through individual situations with you. You always have to try to talk to the utility before going to the Public Utility Commission. What you can do is say that you want to explicitly say to PGW customer service that you want to file a dispute, and that should trigger an internal investigation at PGW. And once they provide you with that decision, you can request a copy of their utility report, which you can use to file a complaint with the Public Utility Commission. You don't have to go through the official dispute process at PGW. As long as you've tried to resolve it with PGW, you can file a complaint with the Public Utility Commission. The Bureau of Consumer Services handles informal complaints, which are you just call, tell them what your issue is, and they investigate. And the number here is the number that you want to call. And when you file an informal complaint, if you're facing shutoff, that filing on its own will temporarily stop shutoff while the PUC investigates, as long as it's filed before the day of shutoff. If you're dissatisfied with the decision in the informal complaint, you can appeal that to a formal complaint. You can also go directly to a formal complaint, but there's not that same temporary stop on shutoff, and a formal complaint is a much more it's a more formal process involving hearings and discovery, and we're always happy to provide advice on the formal complaint process or evaluate whether we could take that complaint. We do take complaints at the PUC. So I'm not going to go through all of my weatherization slides here. I just wanted to sort of introduce the concept. What's weatherization? Weatherization, energy efficiency. There's a number of agencies in Philadelphia, including PGW, that provide services to your home to make them more efficient, make them use energy better, so that you use less energy to heat your home, for example. And getting those services can reduce the overall costs of energy bills over time. I'm going to skip these slides on saving energy, but they'll be in the PowerPoint when you get it. And just to touch on PGW's programs, PGW has a program called Crp Home Comfort. It's a program they're required to run by state law and PUC regulation. The way that the program works, it provides a variety of energy efficiency and weatherization services. You can't apply for the program, you have to be selected, and they target CRP customers who have high usage. And generally, you need to participate in, like, if they send you, you may get a letter that says you've been selected for CRP Home Comfort. You have to participate and allow them to do the work if you want to stay on CRP. It's a condition of staying on CRP. If you're a tenant, your landlord does have to sign off on the work being done. If they don't sign off, that's not considered. That's not what would be considered non-participation for the purpose. You can stay on CRP if your landlord doesn't sign off, because then it's not in your control. And there's been some flexibility this last year with COVID and requiring folks to participate because of COVID concerns. I see a couple chats, so I'm going to pause here and see if there are questions to answer. Oh, never mind. Looks like Cassidy very nicely shared PA gas switch. I'm going to keep going on the weatherization and home repair programs. I wanted to just, I put a bullet here, Energy Sense rebates. PGW has rebate programs if you upgrade your appliances or do different things to save energy, to save gas in your home. Those are generally not super accessible for low-income customers because they're just a rebate on a purchase of a new stove or a new gas heater or a new water heater, and that's not going to be cost prohibitive. But it is something that does exist and that folks should be aware of if it's relevant. Also wanted to, these are not PGW programs, but they're heat related programs. So LIHEAP, in addition to having cash and crisis grants that are monetary help with your bill, has what's called a crisis interface program. If you're eligible for LIHEAP, if you're eligible for LIHEAP crisis, and your heating system is broken or does not function, you can get help heating system repairs, and it is available for both tenants and homeowners. Again, it's the same eligibility requirements as LIHEAP, so income at or below 150% of federal poverty. There's also heater hotline program, which is minor heater repairs for homeowners, and that's the number there. You can see if you can get heater repairs. There's also what's called the Weatherization Assistance Program. I included it here. It has a long wait list, to my understanding. So, but it is free weatherization and energy conservation improvement. It's funded at the federal government level, and the income eligibility is 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. Basic systems repair is not a energy efficiency program per se. But it is, I think in our work, we think home repair is energy efficiency. Many times things that are broken in your house can be leading to higher energy bills. If your home is drafty, you have a hole in the roof, you've broken windows, those things are going to impact your energy bills, and you're going to have higher energy bills. So basic systems repair provides a number of different kinds of services. You do have to be, it does have to be an owner-occupied household, so it's only for homeowners and only for homeowners that live in the household. And you do have to meet income eligibility requirements, which you can find at that link. And you do have to be up to date on property taxes. So just to cover briefly, getting help from our unit. We can help on a wide variety of issues. So we can provide advice on what to do in terms of affording your gas, electric, or water bills. We can provide advice on accessing customer assistance programs, the utilities, including and especially if you've been denied. We're happy to look at that and see if there's anything that we can do to help you with that. We can help with preventing termination and restoring service. We can also help with issues around energy efficiency, medical certificates, tenants' rights to utility service. Just for now, just note that you don't have to be facing shutoff to get service from our unit. And so if you have questions about any of these things and you think you could use legal advice, feel free to call CLS's intake number and leave a message. State clearly what your issue is and your callback number, and then someone will call you back and do an intake and send you to our unit. Also have a whole bunch of information on our website about what to do now that shutoffs are starting. We also did a webinar last week that if you reach out to Cassidy, she can send you the recording of, and we're hoping to get it up on YouTube at some point, that addresses sort of what to do now that shutoffs can start, and what do you do with how do you approach a shutoff notice. So that's it for our presentation. To say thank you. These are our email addresses. You can feel free to reach out to us. Also, if you wanted to reach all of the attorneys in the energy unit, you can feel free to reach to email energylawyers@clsvilla.org. And now we can answer any questions if you have them. Or I gave you 10 minutes back of your day.
So just as a reminder, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A box. I know that we have one participant who's joined by phone. Oh, actually, it looks like they're not here anymore. So you can also raise your hand if you'd like. There should be like a little hand icon on your screen. If you raise your hand, I can give you speaking privileges, and you can and talk if you'd prefer to ask your question that way. But if there are no questions, like Jolene said, we can finish early, and I'll send around the presentation, both a recording of today's presentation and then a copy of the PowerPoint as well. And if you have any other questions, you can feel free to reach out to any of us. I see one question in the Q&A. So just to confirm, an organization can't submit an income verification form for the client.
I think that's a question for Desil related to CRP. You want to try and answer that?
Yeah, sorry, I was unmuting and putting the video back on. So that is correct. So if you go back to the list of acceptable income verification, having you know, your employer, your boss, or another organization say how much money you make, that's not acceptable. Now, if it's in the form of a pay stub, which is sort of like an organization, right, that would be acceptable. But just having, you know, your boss or a supervisor or somebody say how much you make, that's not considered acceptable income, unfortunately.
Yeah, and those are the sorts of things I think I just want to say again, those are the sorts of cases where if you're, you know, you're working in a social services agency, you're working with people applying for CRP, and you're thinking, man, I don't know what I'm going to do here. Feel free to reach out to us. We can strategize with you, or talk to you about, you know, it may end up being a legal issue. I think we are very frustrated with Pgw's income requirements. So we definitely want to help strategize and think about how we can get people on CRP, and what we can use, or how we can help people.
Does that answer your question, Nicole? I wasn't sure if I interpreted your question correctly. Looks like we have another question.
It's a follow-up from Nicole. It's what
is.
options would be best for those who are paid under the table? And I think so you can maybe.
Yeah, so if you're paid under the table, that is of course still considered income. I would recommend in the financial assistance portion of the application that whoever is providing the income, if it's the boss or whoever, they fill that part out and say, I give, you know, let's say it's me, I give Desil $100 a month, and then sign it. And so in that case, there wouldn't be obviously a pay stub or a paycheck, but you would have that person who's giving the money fill out that financial assistance section of the application. Okay. Any more questions?
Thank you for asking great questions, Nicole. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you all. We are here. If you have more questions, feel free to email us or reach out to us in whatever way is useful to you.
Thank you all. I'll give it like one more minute and then end the webinar for everyone. Oh, I see that somebody has their hand raised. Charmaine, did you have a question? And I allowed you to speak, so if you'd like to take yourself off mute, you can.
Right. What's the difference if someone gets paid under the table and someone can vouch for them if the employer does the same thing? I don't understand what's the difference.
Charmaine, can you repeat the question? Sorry, there was a little bit of disturbance. You said what's the difference between someone who's paid under the table and what?
Okay, because you were saying if someone gets paid under the table, then the person can fill it out, the person that pays them. So why wouldn't that be acceptable when you said that your employer couldn't fill out that portion and vouch that you get paid X amount of dollars?
Oh, what I meant is that if the organization or the employer sent a letter saying that they pay that person that amount, so they can't have a separate letter. Their signature has to be on that actual CRP application itself in that section for additional financial assistance. So I think,
okay.
so yeah, so just to clarify that if somebody, whether it's you're paid under the table or like a family member gives you extra money, they can't have a separate letter say that they provide you money. They have to fill out that part on the application itself and then sign that section saying how much they give you and sign it. So it can't be a separate document. It has to be on the application.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Charmaine.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, I think we can go ahead and end there. Thanks to everyone for attending. As a reminder, we've got 2 more webinars, one on Pico and one on the water department coming up over the next 2 weeks. And you can register via the same link that you registered for this webinar. Thanks all for joining, and thanks to Jolene and Desil for presenting. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.